Olá pessoal, hoje o programa Agenda Mundo recebe Gideon Levy, jornalista e comentarista do jornal israelense Haaretz. Shalom Gideon.
Shalom Brasil.
Estou muito satisfeito e honrado por você ter aceitado o nosso convite. Devo dizer que você é muito corajoso por falar contra a maré em Israel, principalmente quando a insanidade parece ter vencido a razão para a maioria dos israelenses. Bem, eu gostaria de começar fazendo uma ou duas perguntas de ordem pessoal, se você não se importa.
Sure.
Ok, você nasceu em Israel, mas sua família veio da antiga Tchecoslováquia. Você poderia nos contar sobre a luta deles para escapar dos nazistas até conseguir chegar à Palestina?
Yeah. Both my parents were refugees, and that's very important to say so. They were not Zionists. They came to Israel because they had to look for a rescue place. They would have never left Europe without if it wouldn't be the Holocaust. And this must be also mentioned. They came separately. They didn't know each other. My father was 26 years old with a PhD in law, and he went on an illegal boat of refugees. There were 600 refugees on this boat. There were 5 months in the Mediterranean. No port would accept them. And the Brits prevented them from getting to Palestine, and they were sent to a detention center in Beirut, Lebanon. How did they live 5 months, 600 people? I have no clue. But there is no one to ask anymore. In any case, he arrived here illegally at night. They just smuggled into Palestine, and all the rest is history. My mother was 10 years younger. She was 16 then, and she was sent with a project of rescuing children, Aliyat HaNoar, the immigration of the youth, which and she was sent to a kibbutz alone. She left her parents and brother back home. And also, to be 16 and to be sent to a new country, you don't speak the language, you know nothing about it. So both of them were refugees.
Ok. Você tem sido um forte crítico dos abusos de longa data a que os palestinos vêm sendo submetidos nas regiões ocupadas e dentro de Israel, bem antes da guerra em Gaza. Você tem uma coluna semanal no Haaretz chamada Twilight Zone, em que denuncia a constante opressão sofrida pelos palestinos. Gideon, durante todo esse tempo, você já passou por algum tipo de ameaça em locais públicos de Israel ou de outras formas, como receber telefonemas ofensivos ou na internet?
You should ask if I ever felt that this is not happening. This is the routine of my life, but I don't think that I'm a victim. There were even times in 2014 in the former operation in Gaza where my newspaper had to hire me bodyguards. Now I feel much safer in the streets, but the social media is full with garbage, and it's not always very pleasant, but I live with it.
Posso imaginar, realmente posso imaginar. Alguns artigos de jornalistas do Haaretz dizem que há ministros neonazistas no governo Netanyahu. Você poderia comentar sobre isso?
Look, some of the right-wing ministers in our government are by far more nationalistic, more racist, and more radical right than you, Bolsonaro, than the right-wingers in Europe, which are called neo-Nazis. Their idea is very obvious. They are waiting for the good timing to transfer all the Palestinians from here. They are waiting to the opportunity for ethnic cleansing, and they don't hide it. They believe that the Jews have supremacy here, and the Palestinians will never get any rights here. That's their thoughts. This can be defined only as neo-Nazis. What else can you call it?
Certo. A ONG israelense B'Tselem, a Human Rights Watch e a Anistia Internacional publicaram longos relatórios denunciando que os palestinos estão sendo submetidos a um sistema de apartheid. A Corte Internacional de Justiça está agora analisando 6 décadas de opressão israelense sobre os palestinos, além das acusações de genocídio apresentadas pela África do Sul. Apenas para lembrar a nossa audiência, Apartheid foi o nome originalmente usado para caracterizar o regime racista liderado por uma minoria branca na África do Sul, antes de ser desmantelado devido à pressão internacional, possibilitando a chegada de Nelson Mandela à presidência. Gideon, você poderia explicar por que o termo apartheid pode ser aplicado a Israel, tanto na Cisjordânia como em Jerusalém Oriental? O que você poderia dizer sobre os palestinos que têm o direito de viver em Israel? São cidadãos de segunda classe? O quanto a situação deles piorou a partir de 2018 com a lei do Estado-nação aprovada pelo governo Netanyahu?
So, if it is apartheid or not, it's not a question of political opinion. It's a factual question. And anyone who has doubts is invited to go to the West Bank. And in the West Bank, what will you see? You will see two villages, one next to the other. One village gains all the resources, water, electricity, land, almost in an unlimited way. The inhabitants of this village have all the civil rights you can imagine yourself. They can participate, obviously, in the elections to the Israeli parliament. They have Israeli passports, they have freedom of movement, freedom of speech, and they live in democracy. The village just next by to them, many times it's a few hundred meters between the villages. The people there, Palestinians, who are, by the way, much longer there, many more generations in this village, on this land, they have very limited resources in terms of water, electricity. Many times they have none. They have very little land. Most of their land was confiscated by the settlement which is next to them. And above all, they have no civil rights, nothing. They are one of the few peoples in the world who don't have any citizenship. They are not citizens of any country in the world. They have no rights, not freedom of movement. The beach, for example, of Tel Aviv is like half an hour away from their homes, can never get there. They are locked in a reality under the wall, the separation wall. And all this division is because of ethnic identity. In one village, they are Jews and they have everything. In the next village, they are Palestinians and they have nothing. How else can you call it but apartheid? And it's time to realize it. Now, Israel claims it's the only democracy in the Middle East. That's very nice to hear. But you cannot be a democracy with having an apartheid system in your backyard. The West Bank is part of Israel in many ways. It's under the control of Israel for 55 years. So how dare you to call yourself a democracy when this reality is taking place in your backyard? There are another kind of Palestinians that you refer to, and those are the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, those who live within the 67 border. They are 20% of the population, and they have basic civil rights like in a democracy. They have passports, they have the right to vote and to be elected to the Israeli parliament. They have freedom of movement, freedom of speech, but much more limited than Jews, especially like now in times of war. But they are deeply discriminated in any field of life, from budgets to the legal system, from opportunities, working places. For example, Israel is now 75 years old, 76 years old. There was never established a new Palestinian town or village in all those years, while in Israel there were so many new villages and towns. So I wouldn't call this an apartheid. That's a very discriminating regime within Israel. And obviously the law of nation, the nation law that you refer to, made things also official. What was before just practical facts on the ground the law of nation, the nation law, made it also official. Israel declared itself as a country, as a society with Jewish supremacy.
Ok. Algumas pessoas acreditam que a situação não está tão ruim para palestinos que são cidadãos israelenses. Aqui no Brasil já escutei várias vezes que eles têm os mesmos direitos, mas não têm realmente.
No, not. And it's always the question to compare it to whom. Yes, the situation is better than the people in Gaza and the West Bank. No, the situation is much worse relative to the Jews in Israel. And in a democracy, they should have been totally equal to the Jews, to the Jewish citizens in Israel.
Certo. Algumas pessoas acreditam que Netanyahu seja responsável por todos os pecados cometidos por Israel. Caso Netanyahu seja forçado a renunciar ou seja afastado do poder em uma eleição antecipada, o que pode mudar para os palestinos? O que você poderia nos falar sobre o papel que a esquerda sionista teve no passado na negação de uma pátria palestina?
First of all, I'll answer your question with one word: nothing. Nothing will change for the Palestinians if Netanyahu will not be a prime minister, and there will be a prime minister from the center left. That's the only option. It can be either from the right or from the Zionist left. For the Palestinians, it will mean nothing. How do I know it? I know it because the Zionist left put all the foundations for the settlement project, for the occupation project. It all started not with Netanyahu, it all started with labor. They put the foundations. Netanyahu just brought it to more extreme places. But the Zionist left was never in favor of putting an end to the occupation, did never anything for a creation of a Palestinian state. So expectations should be very low. There will be certain things which will be different, but not for the Palestinians.
Bem, durante o regime de Apartheid na África do Sul, Nelson Mandela foi mantido preso por 27 anos por defender a luta armada para libertar o povo negro. Durante os anos 80, houve campanhas generalizadas no Ocidente para libertar Mandela e acabar com o Apartheid. Israel está mantendo Marwan Barghouti em prisão perpétua. É um importante político e líder palestino que defendeu a luta armada para alcançar a autodeterminação palestina. O Hamas está tentando incluir o nome dele na lista de prisioneiros a serem libertados por Israel em troca dos reféns. Mas anos atrás, em outra negociação, Israel se recusou a libertar Barghouti, que já está na prisão há 20 anos. Então, Gideon, eu pergunto a você, por que isso? E por que não ouvimos mais sobre Barghouti na imprensa? Afinal, ele é uma liderança palestina muito importante, que poderia atuar a favor da paz.
Barghouti is also a personal friend of mine. You can't see it, but his photo is next to me in my room from a trip abroad we did many years ago together. And I think that Barghouti is not released exactly because he had the potential to unite the Palestinian people and to lead the Palestinian people and to create a real viable partner for peace. But Israel always said no to him, even before he went to prison. I remember years in which he went from one headquarters to the other of the Israeli Zionist parties and begged them, let's do something before everything will explode. And nobody would listen to him. And then he went to a new way, which was a way of what Israel calls terror and they call resistance. And he got 5 life sentences. And Israel is putting him in jail for so many years, knowing that he can be the only one right now who could make a change. But Israel doesn't want any change.
Mas por que não existe no Ocidente um movimento para libertá-lo, como houve com Mandela?
First of all, he's not a Mandela. I love him, I like him, I appreciate him, but Mandela you have once in a generation. He's not a Mandela. He is a fighter. He's a very, very devoted man for his people, but he's not a Mandela. Why the West? Why does the West, you are asking only about Barghouti? Why does the West put sanctions on Russia few weeks after Russia invaded Crimea and never thought to put sanctions on Israel after 55 years of occupation? Why? Because Israel is the darling of the West. We have to remember this.
Bem, se o Ocidente leva a sério a solução de dois estados, então deveria estar interessado em libertar Barghouti.
I agree.
E ele é mantido em isolamento?
Yes, and nobody can see him. I mean, I tried many times to meet him, but his wife sees him once in 2 weeks, but now he's in isolation, and you wouldn't like to be in an Israeli prison, especially after the war started, as a Palestinian prisoner.
Aqui no Brasil, a principal instituição judaica, a CONIB, virou uma espécie de cão de guarda contra os críticos de Israel e do sionismo, acusando-os de antissemitismo. A CONIB está tentando suprimir vozes dissidentes na comunidade judaica. Atualmente, ela está tomando medidas legais contra um jornalista combativo de origem judaica, Breno Altman. Gideon, até que ponto processos judiciais também estão acontecendo em Israel, juntamente com a censura nas mídias sociais e tradicionais, contra aqueles que denunciam o genocídio que está sendo cometido em Gaza?
Israel launched a strategy a few years ago, which is extremely effective all over the world, together with the Jewish and Zionistic establishment all over the world and the Jewish communities, namely to label any criticism about Israel as anti-Semitism. And this paralyzed the world, mainly Europe. It is so effective that some countries even have laws which don't allow to criticize Israel, which don't allow to call for boycotts legally. I mean, they criminalized a conscious struggle, a struggle over justice. In many countries, they criminalized it. And what you describe here about the Jewish community in Brazil is true about the establishment of all the Jewish communities in the world, with one exception, which is very encouraging now, and that's the young generation of the Jewish community in the United States. There comes the change, the big change. I hope it will come also in your country, in Brazil. The young generation today of the Jewish community, not all of them obviously, but the majority says enough is enough. Now you must understand, once the Jewish establishment identify itself automatically and blindly with Israel, it opens a window for anti-Semitism. Because if you are part of the occupation, of the mass killing in Gaza, if you identify with it all along, so you might also pay a price for it publicly. So it's not only about supporting Israel, which is legitimate, but the problem is that the Jewish community support Israel blindly and automatically, and by this they identify themselves with the most right-wing circles in Israel. And that's very, very, very sad, because that's not friendship, by the way. If they think they are friends of Israel, I have news for them. This friendship corrupts Israel. It's not a friendship. Friendship is to also criticize when it's needed. That's real friendship. But as I say, there is a source of hope in the young generation, first in the United States, in the progressive circles of the Democratic Party, and I hope it will get also to your country and all over the world.
Right. Ainda falando sobre censura, sobre o que está ocorrendo em Gaza, como é esse caso do deputado que pode ser expulso do parlamento israelense?
There's one member of parliament there was never a case that a member of parliament was expelled from the parliament. Thanks God they didn't get the majority they needed, and it was rejected.
Em um artigo de opinião recente, você expressou forte preocupação com a completa catástrofe que ocorreria se as tropas israelenses entrassem em Rafah, em Gaza. Biden disse que uma invasão terrestre só pode acontecer se certas condições forem cumpridas por Israel. É possível que Netanyahu esteja, na verdade, blefando sobre promover uma invasão terrestre? Ele está fazendo um jogo para obter a soltura de reféns, para aplacar os protestos das famílias e também forçar a evacuação de palestinos de Gaza para o Egito? É uma questão de quem pisca primeiro?
No, it's not a question of who blinks first. It's a question of the priorities of Israel, and you have to choose either releasing the hostages as first priority or continuing the war and trying to crush Hamas, which will never happen, as first priority. And this government was very clear. They prefer continuing the war and crushing Hamas over releasing the hostages, even at any price. I thought, and many Israelis think, that the hostages are the main goal now, and they should be released in any price because their time is running out. There are elderly people there, there are children, there are women. They will not survive. But the government thinks differently. Now, as about Rafah, if Israel gets into Rafah, there will be a humanitarian catastrophe that even in Gaza we didn't see it. Because in Gaza, Israel pushed all the Gaza Strip into Rafah. There are over 1.5 million people trying to find shelter there. Where will they go? To the sea? Where will they go? To the sky? And where will be the resources? You know, it's 1.5 million people. What about food? What about water? What about electricity? Nothing. So if Israel will continue, it will just increase those who claim that Israel has an intention of genocide.
Mas você acredita que Netanyahu irá contra a recomendação de Biden nesse caso?
Yes, as long as Biden just talks, yes. If Biden will take measures, then there will be different things. But until now, Biden was just talking, and Israel learned to ignore recommendation of an American president because it's never followed by actions.
Eu espero que haja uma primeira vez.
So do I.
Bem, a administração Biden impôs sanções a 4 colonos violentos da Cisjordânia ocupada, seguida pelo Reino Unido e Espanha. Parece que os bancos israelenses fecharam as contas desses colonos para evitar serem eles mesmos alvos de sanções. Mas qual a eficácia que essas medidas podem ter se extremistas no governo, como os ministros Smotrich e Ben-Gvir, não são os principais alvos das sanções? O que você teria a dizer sobre isso, Gideon? É mais uma hipocrisia do Ocidente?
Look, you understand by yourself that to put sanctions on 4 individuals is a joke. And you might think it's a beginning of something. Okay, but let's see how it continues. I am not impressed by putting sanctions on 4 individuals. It's ridiculous. Those people in any case don't travel to the United States and don't have any business in the United States. It's a joke. It's too little, it's too late, it's ridiculous.
Bem, a guerra em Gaza trouxe novamente a urgência de se encontrar uma solução para a autodeterminação palestina. Mas como as coisas estão agora, Israel não aceitará nem a solução de 2 estados, nem a solução do Estado Único Democrático. Quero dizer, um Estado com direitos iguais para todos os cidadãos. Você já defendeu que sejam impostas sanções a Israel, o chamado BDS, boicote, desinvestimento e sanções, como única forma de forçar Israel a aceitar a autodeterminação palestina. Você acredita que o BDS pode ser imposto a Israel se o Ocidente não fizer parte do processo? Você vê um papel que o Sul Global possa ter para impulsionar a campanha BDS?
Absolutely. I think the BDS campaign is right now the only game in town. As long as governments don't even consider putting sanctions over Israel. So it's only for the civil societies to do so. And civil societies are important everywhere. And civil societies might influence their governments. And there is now a momentum of really critical voices getting against Israel. It's not a joke what's happening now, and there is a very positive momentum, in my view, to recruit more resistance to the occupation, more resistance to the war in Gaza, in public opinions. And in this point of view, every country counts, every society counts, because finally it should become the whole world calling Israel, not only with words, the word did in endless resolutions in the UN, but also in deeds, telling Israel that enough is enough.
Bem, as Nações Unidas e chefes de Estado de vários países defendem a solução de dois Estados baseado nas fronteiras anteriores a 1967. Mas você e alguns importantes analistas dizem que seria impossível remover 500 mil colonos israelenses da Cisjordânia, além de mais outros 200 mil de Jerusalém Oriental. Ambas as soluções são muito difíceis de implementar. Apenas tropas da ONU poderiam fazer isso, suponho. Há também uma proposta de uma confederação de duas nações, a chamada Confederação da Terra Santa. Yossi Beilin de Israel e o palestino Riba Hussein apresentaram essa proposta. Não tenho ideia de quão representativos eles são. Em resumo, baseia-se na troca de terras para possibilitar que os colonos judeus permaneçam onde estão na Cisjordânia. Então, Gideon, a minha pergunta é se tal proposta poderia ser uma melhor forma de avançar e resolver a questão palestina quando a atual crise em Gaza estiver terminado e a extrema-direita estiver fora do poder.
Look, the two-state solution is a very just solution. Two peoples struggle over one piece of land. Let's divide the land. It makes sense. And by the way, the two peoples are right now equal in their size. 7.5 million Palestinians, 7.5 million Jews between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean, including Gaza. The only problem is that there is no place anymore, no room, physical room for a viable Palestinian state. As you rightly mentioned, with 700,000 settlers, there is no room for a viable Palestinian state, and nobody is going to evacuate those 700,000 settlers. Part of them are very violent people. All of them are a very powerful group in Israeli politics, and I don't see them being evacuated. Without their evacuation, there is no Palestinian state. They might be a Bantustan, like in South Africa, but not a state. For sure, not an equal state. And therefore, I think we should stop talking about the two-state solution, realizing that this train left the station, and start to think about new ideas. And the only alternative idea is the one-state solution, namely one state between the river and the sea with equal rights to everybody, one person, one vote. That's the only remaining solution. It will take a lot of time to adjust to it. There will be endless obstacles, but at least it is a vision, a real democracy, not an apartheid democracy, but a real democracy. And we should start somewhere, because continuing to talk about the two-state solution plays to the hands of the occupation.
Certo. Vamos ao confronto com Hezbollah e a disputa de território no sul do Líbano.
It's a very, very, very explosive situation, and I can just say I hope it will be solved through a diplomatic agreement, because if there will be war also with the North, this will be a new game, a game changer in terms of casualties, in terms of killing, in terms of also danger to turn into a regional war. And the regional war can very easily turn into a world war. So we are really playing here with explosives. And I hope the first stage should be finishing the war in Gaza today. If the war in Gaza will be over, Hezbollah declared they will stop shooting at Israel.
Mas você poderia explicar a origem dessa disputa sobre as fazendas Sheba no sul do Líbano?
Don't take me there because I'm really not an expert for this. And those things are really technical things. Israel should get into diplomatic negotiation with Lebanon and decide about all those technical questions. We leave it for diplomats.
Vai dar trabalho. Imagino que em relação às colinas de Golan, Israel jamais vai querer abrir mão dessa região.
Never say never. Never say never. We were very close, much closer than returning the West Bank. Don't forget that the Golan Heights is still empty from Jews. There are only a few thousand Jews living there. So it is possible. But you know, Syria is right now not a place that you can make peace with, but this can easier change rather than the West Bank and Gaza.
Mas não seria de interesse estratégico de Israel implementar assentamentos de colonos nas colinas de Golan?
They just failed. It didn't work. They failed. The religious Jews don't see it as holy as the West Bank. So the religious didn't go there. And for the seculars, it was too far away.
Entendi. Gideon, já conversamos bastante sobre diversos temas nessa nossa conversa. Bem, antes de terminarmos, há algo mais que você gostaria de acrescentar? Talvez você possa nos dizer sobre as manchetes principais do Haaretz nessa semana. Mas, por favor, fique inteiramente à vontade para abordar qualquer tema que você queira.
No, not the main headline, but I would like to raise one more question, and that's your adorable President Lula. We cannot talk this whole conversation without mentioning Lula. And my problem is that Israel found itself in the last years under Netanyahu, friends of all the extreme right-winger populist leaders, from Bolsonaro to Orban, from Orban to Donald Trump, obviously, all over the world, the president of the Philippines, all kinds of weirdos. And Lula, I'm not an expert for Brazil, obviously, but I have no doubts that he's a man of conscience. I have no doubts about it. Also, his whole career was, and you might disagree, but that's my feeling toward Lula. I was sorry that he involved the Holocaust. I think it's counterproductive to compare to the Holocaust, because it's very easy to prove that what Israel is doing is not a Holocaust, and then everything is wonderful. If it's not a Holocaust, so bravo Israel. That's not the case. Israel is doing horrible things, and they are not a Holocaust. And still, I was ashamed in the way that Israel treated your ambassador in Tel Aviv, a new ambassador, all this really cheap humiliation to bring him to Yad Vashem, and really it was annoying. And I really hope for better days, because Lula should be Israel's friend and not Bolsonaro, if I may say so.
Olha, eu estou inteiramente de acordo com o que você disse. Creio que o Lula não foi feliz da forma que se expressou. Ele poderia ter criticado as mortes, os massacres, o genocídio. Ocorreram outros genocídios nesses séculos. Cada um teve sua história, suas características próprias. Não vejo a necessidade de comparar os sofrimentos desses diferentes povos.
Absolutely.
Ok. Você gostaria de dirigir alguma mensagem ao Lula?
Não.
Certo. Então, Gideon, eu agradeço novamente por vir ao programa e apresentar suas posições, certo? Estou certo que foi bastante apreciado por nossa audiência, e aproveito para pedir ao nosso público que divulgue o link do programa de hoje que dê seu like e que apoie a TV AGN. Agradeço novamente, Gideon.
Thank you very much. All the best.
Tudo de bom para você também.